Hi, I'm Phyllis Lang and welcome to Nightwear. This video gives an overview of SQM Reader Pro software and highlights the new features in version 2. First, an overview of the organization of the program screen. The top area is dedicated to program controls that manipulate the data reading, storage, and transfer capabilities of the program. The center panel includes the read functions and stop functions. The bottom panel includes all the display of data, whether it's textual display, graphical display, or status messages. We'll start with the Meter Control tab page, where you need to select the model of sky quality meter that you have. Once you do that, the appropriate communication settings can be defined. In this particular case, we have settings for USB type meter that connects to the computer through a serial port. Second thing we need to do on this page is establish the meter installation location and parameters. We have an area for the enclosure offset. If your meter's in an enclosure, then the enclosure glass absorbs some light and makes your readings a bit darker. So we have an offset value to remove that darker offset from your readings. Then we need to describe exactly where your meter is. We need to do that so that your solar altitude and moon altitude values calculated by the program are correct. Finally, we need to establish the Greenwich prime meridian offset in time. In this particular example, I am in the Eastern Daylight Time Zone currently, so I am 4 hours west of the prime meridian. This new feature, the Get Windows Time Zone button, reads the Windows regional settings and extracts your current time zone offset for you. So if you have Windows set up correctly, you can touch this button and you'll get the correct value here. The next step in configuring your reading procedure is on the data collection page. Here we can determine whether we want to collect data once or in a continuous fashion. And if in continuous fashion, how often do we want to read the meter? And do we want to suspend collection while the sun is either up or it is sun up or astronomical twilight? The other part of this configuration would be the time averaging, which is not a widely used feature but very useful. In this particular configuration, we're reading the meter every 5 minutes. Suppose that we want to read the meter several times in a time averaging period. Let's suppose we want to average 3 readings taken each 5 minutes for a period of 15 minutes. If we configure this, our graph will show data every 15 minutes and our data files will show data every 15 minutes. But the 15-minute data point will be composed of 3 readings taken 5 minutes apart during the 15-minute period and averaged. This is a nice way to smooth out data and store it for a smaller data density in your graph. Next, we need to configure the graphing function. There have been a lot of improvements in this area in version 2, so I'll highlight those. First of all, for our graph, we need to set a title. We can invert the values so that the brighter, smaller values appear at the top of the graph, or we can go to the usual sense of the graph where the larger values, meaning the dimmer values, are at the top of the graph. You can also see within the graph that we have a new indicator for the moon. If you hover your cursor over one of these icons, you'll get detailed data about the altitude of the moon and time for the particular data point. You can also float your cursor over one of the data values, in this case magnitude per square arc second, and get the precise reading and the precise time. So again, we can toggle the moon indicators if we don't care to see them. We'll turn them back on if we do. This particular value determines the data density per graph page, and in this case I have 15 points per page. So the graph page is this area. We can see the entire graph over the entire recording period by paging through the graph. We can even go all the way to the beginning of recording and return to the very end. Another thing that's new with this version is that the graph colors can be set with these two color choosers. If you are recording on an XP machine, the color depth of Windows XP is not as deep as Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8. So you might want to choose a solid color so that your graph JPEGs produced by the program are not banded in appearance. The final thing that we can show here on the graph page itself is that the moon phase is indicated, and this moon phase will give you an idea of how much moonlight you're getting if the moon is above the horizon. The next tab we can configure is the data storage page, and this determines how your readings will be recorded, whether or not you'll have your readings panel displayed as a JPEG and stored, also whether either of the graphs will be stored as JPEG snapshots. So you can choose to store in an established reading file name. You can have the reading file automatically named according to date and serial number, and that will be stored in this folder. Or you can choose to have data stored by Julian day and serial. So the difference between these two selections is that this value changes at midnight. You'll have a different file for the before midnight readings and another file after midnight. This selection changes file names at midday. So if you start recording in the evening and go until the early AM hours, you'll have all your data in one file.